It was in Los Angeles that year at the Century Plaza Hotel instead of at the usual spot at the Waldorf Astoria in New York City. Maybe that was also an accommodation. Yeah, because you know if we do it over here, that nigga ain't gonna come. Oh, my life, my life, be waiting for you. Look how you do. We weren't at the Oakwood anymore. Ken Roberts had called to say that we need to get gone from the place. Even after he explained, I couldn't quite understand the reason. Was it drugs? Nothing had changed on the front. Was it rent? I thought he was taking care of it. Was it noise? Music required a certain amount of noise, but much of mine was made in the studio. I had recorded the theme song for Burglar, a movie starring Whoopi Goldberg. I almost never went out. Now, this was the cutest thing. He's sitting there watching the movie while they're playing his song and nobody recognizes him. Child support led to a restriction of my freedom. LA County Jail Cell Block 1750, which was called High Power. Sounds like a song title. Prominent inmates were in there, whether they were famous on the inside or out. Whether other prisoners needed protection from them or they needed protection from other prisoners. You could have been looking at a murderer doing life or a singer doing less. I was in jail for a week, going to months. When Arlene visited, it was one of the only bright spots. She wanted to know if I was scared. I shook my head. They don't F with me, I said, which was true. But I didn't F with them either. When I got out, Ken moved us into another apartment. Different complex, same kind of place. The Oakwood had sold off some of my old stuff to collect back rent, so I had to start over buying clothes and equipment. I also had to start over with a record label, work with A&M, from new songs to Jesse's production dried up during the time I was in jail. What hadn't dried up was drugs. People were putting them in my face, and that put them back in my mind. The restoration of freedom. Then the earthquake happened. Then it kept happening. I failed to show for some court hearings. 2 months after that, I failed to show for another one. Warrants went out. People made jokes. Arrest records were my new records, and I was hitting the charts. Court dates were my new concerts, and I was still just as good about arriving on time. I heard them all at my back because I was gone. I went to the East Coast, stayed with friends in Virginia, friends in New York. Arlene was with me for part of it, including time in New Jersey with James Mtume, who had played percussion with Miles Davis and had a big hit, Juicy Fruit, with his own band. Mtume set up in the basement, and I worked on a song called Time to Modulate, funky as hell. A David and Goliath story rewritten for Popeye and Bluto. The rest of the song was about regrets and resets. How you could feel like you were still making payments on something you shouldn't have bought. The chorus came in. When you wind up making your mind up, that's when you find up instead of down. That's how the year was. Working in the basement, finding up instead of down. We left Mtume's for a week in Virginia, a week in Pennsylvania. Then it was back to New Jersey, to New Brunswick, to stay with a woman named Ruby Jones. She had been on the scene in San Francisco in the early days and in New Jersey in the late days. She ran a boarding house. She gave me and Arlene a pair of rooms. The only thing about it is that Ruby's don't play them drugs. She don't play no drugs. No drugs in my house. But yet and still, Ruby is one of them people that like to sponsor artists that are addicts. They're not, condoning the drug use, but they're giving you the money to buy drugs. They're not saying, here go $100, buy drugs. They're basically saying, here go $100. I know you need some money to live. Here it goes. Back in rehab now, because you can't keep dodging and ducking all the damn warrants. No, nigga. You got to show up to court. And when he got to court, girl, I will never understand this. It's something about how the courts have bleeding hearts for addiction. I went to rehab at CRI Help, a kind of halfway house that worked all the way. I got clean. I started to spend time with family again. Normal time, going to eat, going to the movies. Arlene and I started to talk again. Not about getting back together, but about rebuilding our friendship. One evening, I was driving on Hollywood Boulevard in a Ferrari when I came to a red light. There was another car stopped too. I looked over to see Bobby Womack behind the wheel. Now, I remember reading this story from reading the Bobby Womack book. I love it when we read books and the stories are confirmed in other books. I kept looking in his direction and eventually he turned his head. Sly, he said. Hey, I said back. The light changed. I pulled away. When I saw Bobby's car in my rearview mirror, I had second thoughts. I backed up. Man, I said, how are you? Call me. I'll call you back. I don't know if he called me. If he did, I didn't call him back. It wouldn't have been the only promise that I broke that year. I was clean for a while, but at some point I was using again. I can't say exactly why. It might have had something to do with familiar faces that popped back up and familiar behaviors that popped up too. It might have had something to do with frustrations with getting my music out. I had songs, but no record deal. I was backstage at the hotel dressed in a shocking blue jumpsuit. Backstage might be an exaggeration. I was somewhere behind the stage, sometimes in the kitchen, sometimes just outside in the hall. The call had come in a few months before. The family stone has been voted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for the class of 1993, said the voice. There was no Hall of Fame building yet, just a committee picking artists. But they had picked us. We were in good company. In the first years of the hall, they had inducted the artists who had made me want to sing in the first place. Little Richard, Ray Charles, James Brown, Sam Cooke, Jackie Wilson. The next years added an artist who came up in the early 60s. Aretha Franklin, Marvin Gaye, Smokey Robinson, The Beatles, Bob Dylan, Jimmy, Ike and Tina. Now it was our turn. Other inductees our year included two of the big California bands of the 60s, Creedence Clearwater Revival and The Doors, and some major R&B singers from Ruth Brown to Etta James to Dinah Washington. Frankie Lyman was in the class. Van Morrison was in the class. Dick Clark, Cream, a good class. George Clinton had been selected to introduce the family stone. He and I hadn't been in close contact over the years, but the hall saw him as the right man for the job. Indeed. Baby, let me tell you something. From all the people who he encountered throughout this book and all the relationships that he sort of tried to nurture through drugs and or music, George Clinton seemed to be his mirror. You know what I'm saying? Like they understood each other in the name of funk, drugs, women, well, not necessarily women, because he ain't talk about women, but they had a connection with music and getting high. And it wasn't like a competition between the two. They might have also figured that putting him up on the stage was the best chance of getting me to the ceremony. Now, I didn't think about that. I did not think about that. I did not think about that. But that just confirmed what I said, that those two had a true, real friendship. It was in Los Angeles that year at the Century Plaza Hotel instead of at the usual spot at the Waldorf Astoria in New York City. Maybe that was also an accommodation. Yeah, because you know if we do it over here, that nigga ain't going to come. We got to make sure it's real close. Real close. That's sad to me. Like I said in the earlier video, Sly's issue was not the drugs. It was his accountability to the contracts he signed. And I know you like, nay, the drugs had something to do with him not showing. I know plenty of drug addicts that show. Chris Breezy being one of them. Now, he ain't on the Book of Sugar no more. But it's a lot of addicts that still did what they needed to do. Let's ponder. At ground zero, every goddamn rapper, well, I ain't gonna say everyone, but it's rare that you find a rapper that is clean and sober. Y'all, who do we know is a known drug addict but still gets out there and gets busy? No disrespect to the artists, but I'm saying there's plenty of artists out there that are addicts that still got their work done. Okay, but you know, Sly Stone, when what the baby gonna do? I got to the hotel early the day of the ceremony and set up back in the kitchen and the hall beside it. The people out in the ballroom were going through the run of the show loud enough for me to hear. Who knew I was there? My parents, who were in the crowd, knew. George knew. But what about the rest of the band? I had talked with George about maybe coming out after everyone else had spoken. Had he told them? I was dressed for the occasion, but not sure of the equation. George came on stage, long rainbow braids, a shirt of the flags of the world. I found a spot there. I could hear him without being seen. Wow, he said, what's happening? I had a lot planned to say when I first got there. I thought I was going to be real cool. I was going to be clever, going to be deep, and I was going to be real effective. I walked in, and the first thing I saw was Larry Graham, Freddie, Jerry, Rose, Cynthia, Greg. He didn't mention me. I forgot every damn thing I was going to say. The one thing I always wanted to see, like some people wanted to see the Beatles back together, is to see Sly and the family Stone back together. He went on talking while I went on listening. He called us the greatest funk band that ever was. He told a story about how Dave Kapralik had first turned him on to our music. We went on to be in the shadow of Sly for some years, he said. Finally, we met him, and it was a love affair from then on. Beautifully put. He introduced the group to applause, and out they came. The six of them together in a half circle while the house band vamped. They sang a little of Thank You for Letting Me Be Myself Again, a little of Dance to the Music. Larry added some bottom. For speeches, each of them took a turn at the microphone. Once a band that traded off vocals, always a band that traded off vocals. Freddie stepped up first. Cynthia was next. Then Jerry, who was brief, and Greg, who was slightly less so. Larry was dressed in white like a pastor or a waiter. My name is Larry Graham, he said, booming that bass again. As I was sitting over there watching the whole program, something very special happened to me, which may have happened to you. When Larry got a chance, he would talk. I found a comfortable space to lean and settle in for a duration. stand had to be only 3 minutes long, but I knew I'd have to stand longer. He went on, explaining how he had a deeper appreciation of the gift of life after losing elderly relatives, how he was touched to the point of tears by music and spirit, how he had tried to live a positive life. Finally, he got around to the question of my locations. The thing that really got me, Larry said, is that some of the band members could not be here to appreciate this once-in-a-lifetime privilege. Now there were a few scattered laughs. Rose was last, that is, if I wasn't there. Though now it felt more and more like the band was prepping the crowd for me. I came out on cue. Larry had talked a blue streak, but I was one. Entering from the stage right in my jumpsuit, the band started talking right at me. "There he is! You showed up! It's this guy here!" They began to clap as the house band returned to, "Thank you for letting me be myself again." When the music ended, that's how I started my speech. "Thank you." I spoke clearly and slowly, head bowed slightly. I believe everything's been said. I don't want to forget anyone in saying thanks, So thank you all very much. I love you personally very much. See you soon. And I was gone. Groups being inducted are asked to pose for pictures afterwards. I didn't pose. Wasn't pictured. I turned on the radio and heard a familiar song. A second later, I realized that it sounded familiar because it was mine. Oh, baby.